OmniSkeptic here with another design video, not a balance video, a design video, and let's get right into it. First up, the Colossus. So if you look at the attack animation, you'll notice that there's a large portion of the animation where no damage is actually dealt. All the damage is dealt basically, you know, at the very beginning of the attack, and it's during, like, it's slightly before or during the first swing, and then the beams cross each other and then nothing happens. And this is not just a lack of visual feedback to the player, but it's actually counterproductive visual feedback to the player. There are oftentimes, especially when there's small numbers of units in skirmishes, like maybe a couple Marauders chasing a Colossus that's being, you know, picked up and dropped by a War Prism or something, you'll often see that the beams hit a target and no damage is dealt, and that just really feels bad. And it's kind of unnecessary. So I've gone in and I've sort of rebuilt it and tried to keep as much as I possibly could the same, and basically I spread the damage out across more of the attack. It's not perfect, but it's a large improvement. The reason that I think it was done with the damage front-loaded was laziness. I think that what it actually was if the damage doesn't happen fast enough, the unit that the attack, like the main target of the attack, can actually move out of the beam, and they'll just not take damage, and it feels really bad to have an attack, like, straight up whiff on any and all units. But there are ways around that using my fix. So this is what it looks like in real time. I think it looks pretty good. I'd say it's at least an improvement. Visual feedback changes, like this or the Widowmine targeting change in 5.0.13, I think are really great. So this is a polishing change to the Stalker and the Dark Templar's blink abilities. Blink is a movement ability inherently. You're basically just moving really quick. And I think the Concussive Shell, because it has such a short duration, it feels a little bit strange if you Concussive Shell a unit and then it teleports, but then it maintains the movement deficiency after the teleport, which is like a giant movement buff concludes. But it only lasts for, like, you know, a fraction of a second. So it just kind of leads the movement to feel like sort of jumpy, if that makes sense. So I think it would just make Stalkers, which are already a great feeling unit to control, even better if we could just polish this up a little bit and just, you know, remove the Concussive Shell debuff, whatever fraction it has left of time, upon a successful blink. So this is the change that I, at least as a map maker, I think has virtually no downside. And that is allowing Colossus to walk over top of mineral fields and Vespene geysers. I think I can relatively confidently say has stared at pathing the most, at least among the more contemporary map makers. We could literally just, like, increase the fantasy of the unit for absolutely free. Like, it costs very little investment to do it, and there's, like, no downside. It feels not only bad the way the current Colossus has to path through little tiny paths and mineral fields, but it actually feels really good to move them over mineral fields and geysers. Just keeping in mind, of course, that you still would be unable to path over actual structures like refineries. And yeah, map makers have the tools with painted pathing to just, you know, make sure that there are no negative consequences to this. So this is a small bug fix to the Liberator. If the Liberator is morphing from an anti-air to an anti-ground lib, you are unable to designate a target until the siege up is completed, and there's really no reason for this. It's actually inconsistent, because if you morph from an anti-ground Liberator to an anti-air Liberator, you can set a target. I'm pretty sure this is just an oversight. It tends to be in the Starcraft 2 editor that if you look at any morph ability, there's like a billion issues with them. I just don't think a lot of time was spent polishing them up, to be honest with you. So this is just a nice little fix. Okay, so this is actually a really fun one. Fun fact, the Broodlord's attack range is not calculated from the Broodlord, really. It's more calculated from the Broodling. So what you're seeing right now is probably how it should behave. It just looks like a regular unit. But considering the live game, just take the thought experiment. Suppose the Broodling attack range is the same as the Broodlord attack range. Well, when you factor in the fact that the Broodlings are on the back of the Broodlord and will always be following them and not be in front of them, this essentially means that when a Broodlord is at max range from its target, the Broodlings are not in range, because the Broodlord is, and the Broodlings are, you know, 1 square away behind it. So basically, a Broodlord attacking at max range has a slower attack speed than a Broodlord that's less than max range, and also a Broodlord facing away from its target has a longer range than a Broodlord that is facing its target. Because, like, if it's facing away from the target, then the Broodlings are actually might be in range when the Broodlord's not, and so they'll just swoop immediately. If you're not in range, the Broodlings have to do this move thing right now, where they, like, move from the back of the Broodlord to the front of the Broodlord, which takes a lot of time. But if you're in range, then they just swoop immediately. This is a really important one, and this is aimed directly at the people on the Balance Council and the pros and anybody else in the vicinity. You need to pay attention to this one. Okay, so there is a bug in the live game when it comes to picking up and dropping units that has not been addressed. This has just been around forever. units that are picked up don't have their required target reset. So this would result in some sort of buggy feeling interactions, like for instance, you drop an Immortal on top, directly on top of a siege tank, but instead of shooting at the siege tank, which is the closest unit and the one you'd expect it to fire at, instead it would fire at like some marine that had like shot at it or the war prism it was in prior, that's like on the other side of a giant clump of marines that's like 80 light years away. So you can actually see in this clip, like the tank will hit the unit that's dropped, the unit will get picked up, and then when I go to drop the unit again, it actually just starts beelining for the tank. It doesn't reacquire a target when it's dropped. And this creates other feelings of imbalances, like for instance, you can pick up an Immortal and drop it and just keep doing that, and it'll keep target firing the same roach down, which should require more micro. What I want you to take away from this is that it's not the target track changes that were done in 5.0.13 that are causing the problems. The problems are this pre-existing bug that interacted really, really poorly with the target track changes made in 5.0.13. So if we can fix this bug, I'm pretty sure that you do not need to revert the target track changes made in 5.0.13. I actually think they're really good changes. They should absolutely stay, so please don't revert those. Once the bug is fixed, as you're seeing now, it's really not an issue. Just wanted to add a disclaimer that that visual bug has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and it was not caused by me. It's just something else in the game that I haven't fixed yet. Now, what you could complain about is that the target tracking, turret behavior is not consistent across all units, and on that, I will starkly support you. I think it's really dumb that the Hellion has a turret and it doesn't track its target. Again, what is the point of a turret if it doesn't track the target? Why have the turret? It's the whole point. So, you can see that I've modified the game here to include that. We're living in the future right here. David Kim would be so proud. One thing that I think makes this change good on the Hellion in particular is that if you try to target fire with a Hellion, squad on a particular Zergling, the Zergling will, die from the first 3 Hellions, and then all the other Hellions will, retarget to, some random other Zergling. They don't stay with a close volley, even though you're target firing. Tends to be the Hellions fight light units, so I actually think that the target tracking change has not just kind of a visual and, polished feel to it. I think it actually serves a really good gameplay purpose here. I mean, the Hellion suffers from all the same issues that units like the Gold Tank do, with its sort of wildly swinging turret the moment that melee units get up close to them. Anyway, we just talked about some really impactful stuff, so let's talk about some less impactful stuff. Still funny, though. Turns out you can actually use Contaminate on anything. You can use it on creep tumors. You can use it on sensor towers. Creep tumor case is especially weird, because it says you can't, create units, but, I mean, aren't you technically spawning a creep tumor? I don't know. You be the judge. This is just another violation of that pretty decent rule that abilities that cannot affect targets cannot cast on those targets. So we should get that fixed. And then something unrelated, just a bit of a suggestion I have. I feel like Contaminate should be modified to reveal any units that it is currently preventing the building of, or an upgrade, for instance. As it stands, Contaminate will stop a structure from playing its construction animation, so you actually have no visual feedback as the player that your Contaminate is even doing anything, even if it is in fact doing something incredibly crucial. And that's just not fun, and ultimately design is about fun, it's not about balance, so, if this is a balance problem, then whatever, but as far as the design goes, I think Contaminate could be much more fun if you could see exactly what its effects were. I don't actually have a clip of the live game, but just trust me on it. If you contaminate a structure, you cannot see what it is building in the live game, which really sucks. This one's sort of extra and probably don't focus too much on it, but just wanted to throw it out there. It might be interesting to consider allowing spawned units that don't use effect target, use effect instant. So for instance, the Overseer's spawn Changeling and the Sentry's Hallucination to copy the rally of the unit that produced it. You could take an Overseer, right-click the opponent's main, hit the spawn Changeling button, and then just keep moving the Overseer around, and now the Changeling will go and scout the base. That seems intuitive to me, particularly in the late game. I think it would make it easier for Zerg, which already... I think there's general agreement Zerg APM in the late game is pretty taxed. This one baffles me. Why you would want the very first structure that a new player is exposed to wall inconsistently with every other buildings and how they wall. I don't know why you'd want that. Right now in the live game, in order to make a full wall with a command center or nexus or hatchery, you have to have 2 hexes touching instead of 1. Why? Just fix it. If there's a cannon problem, let the map makers fix it. This game is not sitting on a gigantic pool of new players anyway. We don't need to be actively discouraging them. What are we doing? Starcraft players love to rationalize their status quo, but the reality of the situation is that clicks, setting a rally point from a command center in a game like Starcraft, where, this isn't Age of Empires, there's not, infinite many places that a lumber camp is going to be put down. There's a very specific base marker location you're going to put the CC. So we know where your rally is going to be when it comes to minerals or whatever, right? Like, why does that have to be a manual click? We need to modernize this game, man. This is a completely unnecessary click. If you put down a CC, it should try to rally to the center minerals. It's changes like these that are made for the new players who don't quite understand the importance of expanding, and it takes a lot of clicks, and it feels like it's just not rewarding enough for them to do. Okay, watch the Hydralisk's head bob. This is a bit of a nitpick, but you'll notice that they look like they're walking on two legs almost. It looks like they're bipedal, because they do this head bob thing that, like, we do as humans. The Hydralisk is supposed to be a slithering, kind of like snaky creature. And this is a 1 integer change, 1 value change, and we can just make it look more slithery. Increases the fantasy of the unit at no cost. Really no downside. I feel like we should give it a shot. This one, especially with the poor frame rate, my apologies, it's kind of hard to see, but if you try out the Common Sense Balance mod, you can sort of just feel it for yourself. Yeah, I just think that the Hydralisk is a really iconic unit, and so, the small little, like, graphical upgrades like this, 14 years in, is pretty good, I'd say. Pause to lower your volume.
You seek our service. I am but a phantom, cartoon by the void. I am the darkness. I will comply.
So it isn't too bad when you're the one controlling DT, but when, especially you have an undetected DT or your opponent's doing it, the sound cue of the Dark Templar swiping is really important to understanding, when an attack is going to hit and what unit it might be targeting. And for that reason, its current implementation is poor. Right now, the second the Dark Templar starts its attack, the sound will play, regardless of whether or not the attack is ever canceled. So sometimes you won't even deal any damage, because you'll cancel the attack like super early on, like 0.1 seconds or whatever, and the sound will still play, and it's not very good. So here all I've done is made it so that if you cancel the attack, the sound will also preemptively mute and destroy itself. Your volume's fine now. Another thing is sometimes, especially on creep, Dark Templars can be very hard to track, and I generally think that it's a really poor game design to have like truly cloaked units where you can't see them even when you're looking for them. So something that I think would really help is if we re-added the asset that Blizzard already has in the editor for a Dark Templar attack impact animation, and it's just like this little like silver swipe showing where the target is being hit. And it scales, so it's a little, it's also pretty useful on structures, which is nice. Again, visual feedback changes, some of the most positively received changes you could really aim for, so if you're trying to buy some community love, this one's definitely one I would recommend. If you play a lot of ladder, particularly I imagine if you're Terran, this one will annoy the crap out of you. The fact that workers in the live game, if told to mine from an assimilator, if the assimilator is still constructing, if they reach the assimilator, they will turn back to idle, meaning that if you try to use the select all idle worker hotkey to, send actually idle workers back to work, you'll also pull off all the guys you just put on the refinery. Now this one is an issue that's actually just hard-coded. We're trying to find like a workaround. I've been working on this for a little bit. I feel like the current solution is pretty reasonable. Really, it's just whether or not this gets fixed is a question of if we can come up with like a quality fix that we feel strongly about, which, it remains up in the air. Now, some units, when they morph into another unit, like Zerg units, there's sort of an intermediary unit, like a cocoon, and that sort of signals a break in the order. So if you tell a roach to move somewhere and you morph to a Ravager, its orders get reset. That's reasonable. It's much less reasonable for something like a Hellion to a Hellbat that, like, especially if you have transformation servos, it's literally, like, less than a second transformation. Like, there's really no reason to reset the orders, and so I think it would be pretty good if the orders stayed the same. So you could, for instance, attack, move a bunch of Hellions, and then if Lings jump on them, you hit the Hellbat button, and they morph without, losing their attack move. Just in general, like, if, for instance, if you have Hellions and you want to run them away, you can right-click them away and then morph the Hellions without resetting the command and having to right-click again. It's really just kind of getting rid of these mundane, useless, and unproductive clicks. Also, there are a lot of units that don't have an icon on the command card when, like, an upgrade is researched, so you don't know, for instance, if a Hellion has transformation servos until you try to morph. You don't know if a lurker has adaptive talons. So Blue Flame doesn't exist on the Hellion and the Hellbat. You have to actually fire to see it. So just stuff like that would also be good to add to the command card. I also think that there should be a quick pass done on the burrow tooltips, because, like, for instance, the Infestor has a passive icon on the command card that says that it can burrow move, but that shows up and is, like, totally visible and colored, even if you haven't researched burrow yet. So, like, how are you supposed to burrow move if you don't have burrow? Like, so it's just stuff like that where, like, we should add some requirements to make it look and feel more instructive. The Roach command card could also be adjusted to have its rapid healing closer to the burrow icon. Just small stuff like that. Shield batteries can auto-cast heal, obviously, but they also have the ability to hit stop to stop the current channel. So, for instance, if you're healing a gateway with a shield battery, you can hit stop and it'll stop healing, and it won't auto-cast it because it's a building. But if it's an Archon and you hit stop, it will stop healing the Archon, and then it will just auto-cast, like, potentially the same Archon. So, like, that kind of just feels unpolished to me. It should probably be that if it is auto-casting a target, that could be re-auto-cast. If you hit stop, it will search for a different target. So it doesn't, like, re-heal the same Archon over and over. It would switch every time you hit stop. And this raises the skill ceiling on the control of a shield battery a little bit, because, you know, for instance, if you have an overcharged battery, you can hit stop to make sure that's actually healing the right target, or rather not healing a target you don't want it to heal, or something like that. It's just, you know, a small polish. It feels like people have been avoiding allied push priority changes forever. I will never understand it. Every time I've played with them, it always feels more intuitive, and like the units are doing what I want them to do more often. Not only should the Ultralisk have the push priority for Zerg, but I actually think that in Terran's case, the Thor should have it. And then to prevent the Thor from, you know, pushing around tanks in sort of strange ways, I think the tank should also have it too. And this has a couple of great benefits, but the most important one, I think, is the ability to get siege tanks past bio. A lot of times, if you're on the higher end of ladder and you want to get a tank to a forward position, you actually will struggle to get it through your bio army. So what you see pros do a lot is they'll actually just pick it up in a tank and then drop it ahead of the army. But, like, that in and of itself, the fact that they're even doing that pretty much signals to me there's a problem. The tank should probably just be able to filter past the bio. If one of them has a higher priority than the other, they will more naturally do that. So yeah, I think it would be great if we could give this a try. Again, this change only really works for the largest units, because they are the ones that are pushing, and it looks very strange for large units to be pushed. So yeah, there have to be a little bit of experimenting with this, I think. This is a quality of life change for Zerg units. There tends to be this situation where Ravagers will be like waiting for their bios to come off cooldown, or they'll be positioned just outside of siege tank range so that the correct number, like 3 or whatever, is selected and ready to go try to bio a tank down. But the thing is, even if all the Ravagers are just out of range, when you go to send in just a few, unless you're hold positioned, all the Ravagers are going in. You know, you get slightly hit and they're all going in. So I feel like a very targeted and precise change to the acquire movement for the Ravager would be a welcome change for Zerg players. The only case where this is really noticeable has to do with siege units anyway, and there aren't like a lot of those. So there's really not a huge downside here. It's just when players are sitting directly outside of siege range with a Ravager, you know what they're trying to do. The game should not be intentionally suiciding your units. Which leads us into an equivalent change for Protoss. Oracles are a very momentum-based unit, and the way that the aggro on things kind of makes them feel clunky because of their dependence on it. They would feel much more smooth and nice if they didn't use their scan range to aggro outside of their actual attack range. Obviously, you don't want to decrease the scan range in order to accomplish this, because it would mean that they would, like, if you attack moved, they would have, like the Stalker Widowmine interaction from Heart of the Swarm. But you want to turn off the chase filters, and they just feel so much better to move around mineral lines. I swear to God, it's amazing. Again, Starcraft player is going to Starcraft and, you know, try to uphold the status quo no matter what it is. And they'll whine about, you know, but the skill, but I mean, realistically, the units should not be intentionally trying to suicide. They should be trying to best behave according to the player's intentions. And in this case, like you can see in this clip, like clearly my intention was to kill the workers and not to just, you know, run across all the way to the other side of the hatchery to go attack a spore crawler. But obviously, if you do want to engage, you can still do it.
Extrapolating strings.
again, people, keep in mind, we're trying to make a fun game here, not a freaking chore. At least one thing we can all agree upon as a community is that RNG is generally bad, and we should make it so that when an SCV is building, when it's moving around, the time that it takes, the delay between moving from location to location, should not be as large as it is right now. We should shrink that to be somewhat like the same number of drills or whatever before it starts to move. So just to be clear, I'm not talking about making it longer between, you know, each time it changes location. I'm talking about reducing the randomness of it, just making the value more consistent. Harkening back to the target tracking changes earlier, the unit that actually needs target tracking more than the Immortal, the Tank, the Hellion, any of these units, it's the Phoenix. Because the Phoenix, you try to target a particular medevac, for instance, that you know is carrying all the stuff, and then if you issue a move command, it will retarget to the closest target rather than continuing to attack the one that is tracking. Just terrible game design. We gotta fix it. This is the worst possible thing. I'm so shocked that the target tracking was added to the Immortal and the Tank, but it wasn't added to the Phoenix. Like, it's just blown my mind. Honestly, if you ask players, they will literally think that the Phoenix already has target tracking. That's how crazy it is that it doesn't. So as you can see, once the Phoenix has had a designated target, as long as it does not leave the range of that target, it will keep shooting at it, which is how everybody expects it behaves anyway. So, just a good change. The reason the Phoenix needs it so bad, if you're curious, is just because the Phoenix fires on the move. So unlike other units where you can sort of sync up using stutter steps so that it's always like you designate the target when the attack is quote-unquote ready to go, Phoenix you don't really have control over when it's ready to go because it's just going to start shooting the moment it enters range, and the units in a clump of Phoenixes will all enter at different times. And there's no way to stagger it, so to like sync them all up. This is a bug fix that I think actually does have a reasonable impact on the CVP late game. Right now, Neural Parasite is bugged so that when you Neural Parasite a carrier, you do not inherit the carrier's upgrades, which is how like every other unit in the game basically works. Like you take a roach and you get the roaches of upgrades of your opponents, not yours. But unfortunately it resets to 0-0 when you steal a carrier, so I've got a fix for that. Hopefully that gets deployed in the next patch, and maybe Zergs will, I don't know, have an easier time dealing with carriers. Alrighty, well I'm starting to run into things that I want to put in this video, so some honorable mentions. There's a whole bunch of sort of bugs around the Adept's attack move when it's a shade. So hopefully we can get those fixed. There's the beam damage bug where like all the sentries and void rays and oracles will like sync up their attacks to fire at the same time and stuff like that. That's hopefully going to be fixed. There's a bug I remember seeing Hearthstone point out, which was about how Phoenix Graviton Lift could be defeated, if you would. Like you can cast Graviton and you are able to pick up the target of the Graviton in like a medevac, and it'll cancel the Graviton even though the Phoenix has expended the energy, which obviously should not be the case, so hopefully that will be fixed. The Psystorm actor model should probably be reduced slightly in size. Oh, there's my pet peeve that the auto turret upgrade level is not increased when you research it on the turret. You should be able to select it in order to see the upgrade change. I don't know. Maybe I'll add another video if I ever come up with enough of this stuff. Although what I'm thinking about next is maybe instead of doing a design video, my next one will be like a map pool recommendation video, because like I don't know who's making these decisions, but in my opinion, I think they could use some help. This is OmniSkeptic, signing off.